Hello there, I'm SaSeshen and welcome to the stream. Today we're going to talk about a very historic moment in not our nation's history, but in world history. Mexico has elected their first female presidenta, Claudia Sheinbaum. And she is a extreme left-wing, very popular, very populist presidential candidate now, president-elect, who is making history in more ways than one. We're going to talk about her, and then we're going to also cover the major news events of the day. There are some that are tragic, some that are exciting. For instance, the exciting, let's go with that first, shall we? Simone Biles has won her 9th national championship. That's incredible, and I look forward to diving into that article. And then on the less happy aspect of it is things like the Akron shooting in my home state of Ohio, and that Netanyahu is doubling down on crushing Hamas. So we are going to get into all of that. And of course, the first segment of the stream is going to be focusing on the main topic, which is the Claudia Sheinbaum, her election. We're going to listen to some interviews and some video commentary about her. And then we're going to get into the gaming hour where we're going to address, key issues as they come up. And after that, we're going to do some commentary. So basically reacting to other creators and their inputs on the various issues. We might also mix it up. Who knows? There might be a bunch of y'all and we might end up having a nice long conversation. Either which way, it's a stream, so we'll figure it out as we go along, right? So without further ado, we'll go ahead and listen to Brianna Joy Gray.
200-year history, Mexico has elected a female president. Claudia Sheinbaum is Mexico's projected presidential winner and will succeed President Andrés Manuel López Obrador. Sheinbaum is a climate scientist and former Mexico City mayor, also the first person from a Jewish background to lead the overwhelmingly Catholic country.
The new Mexican president will play a vital role in the country's relationship with the U.S., including progress toward limiting migrant crossings and cross-border drug trade. Per government statistics, U.S. Border Patrol encountered 250,000 migrants crossing into the U.S. from Mexico in December 2023. Mexico also became the U.S.'s top trading partner in the year 2023, surpassing China and Canada per CNN. To break all of this down, we have Rafael Bernal, a staff writer at The Hill. Welcome back to the program.
So let's touch on a couple of those points right there. So clearly, the immigration issue at our border is still a hot button topic in America, although eclipsed by the Israeli genocide of Palestinians and the ongoing Trump indictment, where he was found guilty of 34 counts of falsifying business documents. Not only that, we also, of course, have the Hunter Biden trial and the various things that keep happening, such as the Akron mass shooting and the fact that now that it's Pride Month, we're finding out more and more how dangerous it is for the LGBT community to live in certain states. So despite all of those very powerful issues that plague our country and, of course, the news cycle, the immigration crisis is still something that is being discussed and being a prominent focus in various election cycles. So to that end, sorry I was losing all my words there. Sometimes it gets difficult staring into the to the camera and figuring things out. I come to you as a streamer, yes, but also someone who has been on the CNN debate stage, who has ran for some of the highest levels of office in the country. And if you go to www.samronan.com/issues, you will find that I do have a comprehensive platform and policy positions. And to which end, one of them is, in fact, how I would handle the border crisis. So, of course, this is about Claudia Sheinbaum, and we're going to get into that real quick. I just want to make sure that when we talk about the immigration crisis, such as it is, we need to understand that our country was founded on immigration, and that if we're being perfectly honest and 100% on the up and up, Mexicans, the people who are immigrating into the United States, are indigenous to these lands. We are not. And with that in the back of your mind, let's continue.
Hey, always a pleasure to be here.
Yes, it's great to have your expertise with us. So tell us more about this figure who is now going to be the president of Mexico and what her placement is in the political world relative to the previous administration.
Well, the most interesting thing about Claudia Sheinbaum is we know who she's been politically. She's been a mentee of López Obrador. We don't know who she will be as president. There are many questions. There's some contradictions in her background. She is a climate scientist. Says she's a big environmentalist. Her biggest infrastructure policy was a continuation of López Obrador's own infrastructure policy in Mexico City, which was building more highways, and she's leaned into this. So there are real doubts. She's as a character, she had a very pretty much communist upbringing with close relations with Cuba. It's said that she spent her summers as a kid going to communist Cuba at the time, which at the time in Mexico was not well perceived by a majority of people, but there was a subset.
Now, I don't claim to be an expert on all international politics or each individual nation's politics, but I was not aware that Mexico and Cuba had a bit of a rift between them as well. I actually thought that Cuba's major rift was just with America, because, I mean, I have friends and family throughout Europe and all across the globe, and they talk about Cuba all the time. So I find it very interesting that Mexico, or at least there was like some sort of stigma among Mexicans to travel to Cuba. I wonder if that's also true for other Latin American and South American countries. I wonder if Guevara could answer that for us, and we'll get back to you.
Set of communist sympathizers, and it was at the time it became legal after a while to be a communist in Mexico. So it's not the same feeling as it would have been here in the United States. I think that's important to say. She led this giant city that's had this cultural resurgence. It's become sort of a world capital, and even with those very left-leaning principles, there's been sort of a gentrification of downtown Mexico City with its pros and cons. So the big question remains is, she obviously ran on continuity because she ran on the party ticket of a very popular incumbent. It would have been political suicide not to run on continuity, but the question is out there: will the continuity include the good and the bad, or just picking one or the other from López Obrador's policies?
Yeah, I mean, I saw progressive former Greek finance minister Yanis Varoufakis celebrating the win. He tweeted, "Congratulations to friend and fellow traveler Claudia Sheinbaum. Winning the presidency of Mexico is not just a confirmation of Andrés Manuel's policies in favor of the poor, but a giant leap for radical feminism and ecology, a rare glimmer of hope in a bleak era." And it's worth noting that she didn't just kind of squeak one out the way we're used to these days in American elections, but one with basically 59% of the vote.
That's something I definitely am glad Brianna brought up in her reporting here. Claudia did not just win her election barely, 51% versus 49%. She won handily. She beat her next runner-up by 30%. I hope I get this right, but it's Schotel. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to butcher it. When you see a X and an O, that's difficult for me to pronounce, and I apologize for that. Her opponent was Xochitl Galvez. I can say Galvez. I apologize. But they only received 26.6% of the vote compared to Claudia's, where is it? 58%, upwards of 60.7%. So the long and short of it is she won handily. She won by a landslide. And that was what I was trying to get away with, trying to put out there. I clearly need to take some remedial Spanish courses. I apologize to anyone that's Spanish speaking and listen to me butcher that. Not intentional. But that is what is also historic. What people don't realize is when you do exercise your vote, and so many of your fellow countrymen vote as well alongside you, and together collectively as a country, you overwhelmingly decide this is the future we want. It sends an extremely strong message, not just to the rest of the world or to the country and how it's going to change there, but also the status quo, because the will of the people has spoken, and now it's up to the status quo to either adapt and change or be crushed under heel by the, well, the marching feet of history. So, without further ado.
To what do you attribute her victory, especially if there are kind of familiar sentiments, familiar as what we kind of expect and are familiar with in America, that about kind of Red Scare?
Social. See, now I can say that, no problem. All right. So her opposition was Social Galvez. And they didn't even come close. So carrying on, thank you, Oshun, thank you.
And criticism of left politics and the vilification of communism and things like that.
This kind of landslide is actually very familiar to any Mexican, probably over the age of 40, certainly over the age of 50. It's a what the Mexicans call an election of state, meaning the Mexican state. It was there was a lot of intervention by López Obrador at times, potentially illegal. Obviously, he wasn't judicially reprimanded for commenting on the election while there.
That was the most polite way I've ever heard of someone refer to a president rigging their own elections and being corrupt. That was chef's kiss, honestly. That was just carry on.
There are very strict laws on what a sitting president can say. It's a party. He's created a party that in many ways reflects the hegemonic party that led Mexico for 70 years in the 20th century, and that very reluctantly let go of power in a very democratic election. So it sort of ended well in the year 2000, but since the year 2000, that Mexican democracy has been losing steam. It's an election where the official party, what they call in Mexico, operated the election, which is sort of it's sort of a combination of get out the vote and voter coercion that's very unique.
To be perfectly fair, I wanted to have a celebratory hour of Claudia Sheinbaum, but here we are getting like the nitty gritty of Mexican politics, and it's not much different than American politics. I mean, think about it. How is our election system any less rigged, any less under the control of the party, right? Instead of it being one party, right, one major only organized party, there's two major parties, but when it comes right down to it, don't they normally work together on most things that effectively come to fruition, right? Like, fine, the Democrats are keeping the Republicans at bay from banning abortion outright nationally, but for how much longer? And how long until the Democrats themselves start capitulating to other ideology, right? For instance, George W. Bush, he's now hand in hand, arm in arm, a cute little uncle to the Democratic Party when he was public enemy number one. How long into the future until Donald Trump is just, oh, remember when you were a silly little goose and we, the Democrats, were, up in arms about you, but no, you're not, you're just a silly little guy, right? To me, I don't see much different in correlation between what this guy is talking about, Rafael Bernal, and how our own electoral process works. It's very interesting, the parallels.
To Mexican politics, and they called it. They said this is going to be a 2-to-1 margin, And yes, a lot of polls did reflect that, but polling in Mexico is widely inaccurate. And you know what the party said, the polls that the party commissioned, and the end result are all the same. But that does not take away, and this is important because there's a lot of suspicion, there's a lot of processes that remind us of the hegemonic PRI of the 20th century. But the social programs put in by Morena, López Obrador's party, are enormously popular, and they have made a dent in Mexico's poverty.
Also, key point of note, the former president of Mexico instituted a lot of social programs that helped people out of poverty, and they are immensely popular. Immensely popular. Does that sound familiar here in the United States? Social Security and Medicare. Those two were passed by FDR and were immensely popular. To this very day, those are the two most popular government programs in the country, and it's because they do the most good for the most people, right? That is the social safety net of America. And it is exactly what got FDR 4 presidential terms, and why the Congress and Senate of the era decided to pass the amendment limiting the term limits to 2 for the president, but interestingly not for themselves. So just a way to tie it back into our own historical background and the political parallels that seem to, that seem to resonate between nations regardless of type of government that is being held, the era in which the government and politics is taking place. It's almost as if whenever you decide to take care of people as an elected person, they will willingly and enthusiastically support you. Almost the exact opposite of what's happening today, where we are being told to eat crow and ask for more.
Cycle just through direct cash transfers. So there's a little bit of this and a little bit of that, but it's not a wild triumph of absolute democracy, zero corruption, everything's going to be fine from now on. There are definitely major concerns and many major concerns in the bilateral relationship, not just on migration, but on sort of bubbling trade disputes between the United States and Mexico.
There's also some question and some interest in whether or not she is going to sort of be a continuation of AMLO's sympathetic posture toward Gaza, the Palestinians, in the wake of the siege on Gaza. Previously, Obrador, he declined to call it a genocide, but then did say that Mexico wanted to join South Africa's petition at the ICJ.
So I think, not that I want to cut off Brianna by any, she is a fantastic journalist. She has been around the block in progressive circles for years, longer than I've been involved, for sure, because I was in the military at one point. So, thank you for the sub. I hope whoever got it is also appreciative. But I think, rather than speculate on the new Madam President, we should actually, in fact, hear from her. There's an interview.
Estrogen is killing men. In the next 60 seconds, I'm going to tell you all about this sneaky hormone and what you can do to stop it. So
Hello, everyone. I'm Rania Kalik with Breakthrough News.
So I think it would be better to hear from Miss Presidente herself. And actually, the two people who from Breakthrough News and People's Dispatch asking, I'm hoping, some pretty hard questions. 28 minutes with some commentary, might be a little bit longer. But hey, let's see what Claudia herself has to say about her presidency and her election.
Zoe Alexander with People's Dispatch. We're here in Mexico City, and we're joined by Dr. Claudia Sheinbaum, the head of government of Mexico City, and one of the founders of Morena Party of President Andrés Manuel López Obrador. She's a rising figure in Mexican politics and one of the frontrunners in the 2024 Mexican presidential elections.
Dr. Sheinbaum, thank you so much for joining us.
No, thank you for coming.
This is an older interview. Well, egg on my face. Let's see. Well, no. Egg on my face, folks. Claudia Scheinbaum. Looks like, is there anything, discusses her presidency? I mean, what do we do now? I want to hear her. Don't we all kind of want to hear from Claudia at this point? Well, oh, it looks like that might be the.
No llegó sola, llegamos todas, con nuestras heroínas que nos dieron patria, con nuestras ancestras, nuestras madres, nuestras hijas y nuestras nietas. Felicito a todas y a todos los mexicanos que el día de hoy, con su participación, demostramos que México es un país democrático con elecciones pacíficas. Nuestro gobierno será honesto, sin influyentismo, sin corrupción ni impunidad. Será un gobierno con austeridad republicana, disciplina financiera y fiscal y de autonomía del Banco de México. No habrá aumentos reales a los combustibles ni a la electricidad. Mantendremos la obligada división entre el poder.
Okay, so she is definitely advocating for clean energy initiatives. She's obviously advocating for anti-corruption measures and so on and so forth. So that's good. Obviously, time will tell whether or not she pulls through. And it's also interesting that she is emphasizing that there will be a division between political and economic power, the exact opposite of what the United States is doing. And I think it's important to recognize that contrast and distinction. With Citizens United, money is free speech. Therefore, money is the same thing as power, as influence, as the vote. And so when corporations can literally determine the outcome of elections at any level with the sheer amount of money involved, it does become a problem with the ethics and morality and, of course, the transparency of politics and government in general. Who do our elected officials serve? In my previous stream on Friday or maybe even Thursday, I discussed how less than 1% of all legislation that is passed has anything to do with public opinion. And that is a fact. That is irrefutable. That has been the case for decades, and it only gets worse. Do you think those offshore bank account, tax evasion haven laws were passed by people like you and me? No. Do you think we would have passed a law that would have limited teachers to only writing off $200 worth of school supplies that they themselves had to pay for out of pocket? Absolutely not. So, granted, a promise, which is the speech that she is giving, and the ability to carry it out and follow through are two different things. But it is hopeful that because she's bringing it up and she comes from a background of science and having been a part of the popular and more socialized movement of her country, there is weight to her words. So I, for one, am quite excited.
Poder económico y el poder político. Respetaremos la libertad empresarial y promoveremos y facilitaremos con honestidad la inversión privada nacional y extranjera que fomente el bienestar social y el desarrollo regional, garantizando siempre el respeto al medio ambiente.
See, I would take a different approach to that. And it's, again, it's all part of the goal here. This is speaking it into fruition here. Private industry serves a role in a country. It is one part of many, but it does not have power, influence, or authority, or rather, it shouldn't have. And that's the main difference, right? When you give public goods and services like water, electricity, any other utility for that matter, public transportation, government for that matter, the funding of education, healthcare, things that are necessities in order to survive. When you turn those over to private interests, you basically turn over your rights, your freedoms, and your country, or your various stages of government to private industry. And what are those private industries going to do? The best of their ability, providing the highest amount of quality, with the quickest turnaround and least expenses, the whole trifecta? No. They're going to do whatever they can to make the most profit, period, dot, end of story. That means less quality, doesn't care about turnaround time, and for the lowest price conceivably possible within the law, and sometimes not even within the realm of the law. So, to me, I am an advocate against marrying private interests, private industry, as a form of rehabilitating or investing in communities. I think that should be the role of the state or the government, because why? Simple question. What is the purpose of a government if it is not to provide for the basic needs of a people? If we have to rely on corporations to do so, then why don't we just give all of our rights, freedoms, and aspirations and political power to corporations? Oh, wait. We've done that. And you can see the results of that every time you go to the grocery store, every time you go to gas up your car, and every time you go to pay your bills. It is time to stop this illusion, rather delusion, that capitalism is here to help, or to nurture, or to grow. It is here to exploit, take, and devour. That is its only purpose. And that is the only purpose it can ever serve.
Haremos por convicción el presupuesto público para garantizar todos los programas del bienestar iniciados por el presidente Andrés Manuel López Obrador y también todos los programas a los que nos comprometimos. Con los Estados Unidos habrá una relación de amistad, respeto mutuo e igualdad.
So, I mean, I was just extremely harsh, right? But in all honesty, like, Canada and Mexico pretty much don't have a choice but to be friendly with America, because it's for the same reason why the international court can't actually enforce its rulings against countries that America doesn't want it to, right? It's, on the one hand, America strong, but it's also kind of, it's almost something that you have to say. It's like, hey, please don't look at us silly. We're still going to maintain friendly relations. But being a major trading partner with an economy that is growing and with a democracy that is beginning to start to flourish, and some of the corruption being handled and the cartels being handled, you wouldn't want to ruin those relations. I think it goes without saying, but I would almost, and of course we still have a few seconds left of her speech, I would almost hope that she would challenge the United States. I'm the new president of Mexico, and I think y'all need to get your head out of your ass.
Igualdad como hasta ahora ha sido, y siempre defenderemos a las y a los mexicanos que se encuentran del otro lado de la frontera.
Hey, that was an interesting
Thanks for
ending,
watching.
too.
Stay.
The fact that she recognizes the immigration of her people into our country as still her people. That, unfortunately, brings up, I guess, the contention that illegal immigration, quote-unquote, undocumented immigration, is a crisis because they don't act or try to integrate with American society. And to a greater or lesser degree, I don't think that should really matter. I think if you're going to be in this country, there should be an easier barrier. There should be less of a barrier to entry. For instance, most of these undocumented immigrants are being taken advantage of in the workforce because they can. Because if they don't comply with whatever abuses they are having to endure, they'll just get deported. And then whatever good they had accomplished for their family, either on the other side of the border or within our own, is out the window. So we need to protect migrants regardless of their status. That's the first thing we need to do. And secondly, if the idea is to work in America and then bring that money home, it doesn't matter so long as they've paid the taxes in America in the first place, which, if you really think about it, the migrant community may not necessarily pay payroll taxes, but they're still paying for groceries, they're still paying for housing, they're still paying for utilities, they're still paying for goods and services throughout the country, are they not? So they are paying taxes without any of the benefits, without any of the protections of the Constitution. So to say that undocumented migrants or illegals are somehow mooching off of the system is patently false. If anything, they're contributing to it in ways that even the wealthy aren't. Because the wealthy are avoiding so much of their tax burden and placing it on our own shoulders. It's proportionately less than what even undocumented migrants are paying. So it is interesting that Mexico also recognizes this migrant situation as transitory, transactionary perhaps, or even temporary. And I think if we start having these conversations about migration in America with that understanding, we can start resolving our own humanitarian crises. So I think we've done a good job of covering Claudia from her own words and, of course, from reporters and other agencies. I think we can move on to a different subject. Namely, let's do the Hunter trial. Because that is ongoing, and, in
many ways, I love $29 donors more than I love...
Not giving him airtime.
Hunter Biden begins tomorrow in Delaware, marking another big case during a busy campaign season.
So let's go off the wall to understand how we got here, what we should expect, and the other legal troubles that Hunter Biden is facing. We'll start with the trial this week, Pete, which is about a gun charge. If we'll remember, going back to the beginning in October of 2018, Hunter purchases a .38 Colt Cobra.
Yeah, this is not about overseas business dealings. This is about a gun. He purchased it. Now, 11 days later, remember Haley Biden? This is Beau Biden's widow, who then linked up with Hunter, did a lot of drugs, and did a lot of other things. Well, 11 days after that gun was purchased, she took it and tossed it in a trash can behind a grocery store.
I mean, I guess we're getting into the personal attacks early on this conversation, but hopefully if we look past the rhetoric, we can get into the facts instead.
Or if you'll remember, Secret Service came in behind and grabbed the gun as well. So there's more details of this, of why were they involved in potentially trying to make this gun charge go away.
Well, you bring up drugs, and that's the key thing here when we're talking about this charge when it comes to a gun. Because in his biography, a memoir, in April of 2021, Hunter says, I was smoking crack every 15 minutes.
And he said that about 2018. Remember, October 2018. And he also says in the book, I got sober in 2019. So the acknowledgments in his own words, he read his audiobook, are that, hey, I was not sober when I was.
So what's interesting is that it is not actually unprecedented that someone who wrote and published their own memoir incriminated themselves later on and then was in fact found guilty. So in many ways, Hunter Biden is bringing this upon himself. Okay. AMLO was more combative with the U.S. than any president in recent history. For example, he said he was going to start deporting undocumented U.S. citizens that were living in Mexico, but I had read Claudia is not as combative. Well, that's unfortunate, but that is funny that, I'm just going to say AMLO, threatened to deport undocumented U.S. citizens, which, if you think about it, is probably just as prevalent, especially with cost of living probably significantly less in Mexico. Or the fact that, maybe we'll just go down here for spring break. You know what? I don't think I want to go back to school anymore. Let's just live it up a while. I do think that is pretty amusing. Thank you for sharing.
Off drugs when I was purchasing that gun, which is illegal.
Right. The charge then is he lied on a form, a federal form to buy the gun, because you can't if you're a drug addict. He's a self-admitted, if you're smoking crack every 15 minutes, drug addict. Hunter then, in June of 2023, pleads guilty to the misdemeanor charge that we're discussing. This is in order to avoid prosecution. That at the time, you'll remember we talked about here, I was like, whoa, that's a heck of a deal out of the blue at the last minute.
It was a massive sweetheart deal. And then it went into the courtroom, and as you rarely see in an unscripted moment during deliberations, the judge said, no, this is not a fair deal. It was actually, if you recall, I don't have the judge's U.S. District Judge Mary Ellen Noriega, nominated by Trump, found the deal unusual and said, no, we're not taking this.
So the charges come back. Weiss charges Hunter Biden on a three-count indictment when it comes to gun charges. That is what is set to meet the courtroom this week.
Exactly. Speedy justice, maybe not. September 2023 is when the charges happen. We're going to trial here in June of 2024.
So what to expect this week? Well, like all trials, we're going to start with jury selection starting on Monday.
Apparently, I don't know if I buy this, but apparently the reports are that Hunter Biden's financial struggles, he's getting a lot of support from the outside, may limit his ability to mount a robust defense, to call in outside witnesses or experts or specialists to defend him. Other people have been funding him for a long time. I wouldn't be.
That's interesting. I mean, if we're going to talk about collusion or influence, right, about political involvement or political conspiracy that one administration is trying to negatively hamper the other. The Trump nominee judge was the one who threw out the plea deal that was brokered in the first place. If we're going to talk about, some sort of coercion or some sort of underhanded tactics, there's a greater historical trend of Trump appointees acting on behalf of or in favor of Trump to gain his support than there is of literally, Republican or Democrat, any other president's administration, their appointees, or otherwise. So I'm not saying that this trial is happening because of that. I am saying if we're going to make arguments or false accusations about the Trump trial, then the finger can easily be pointed back at Trump himself and this current trial with Hunter Biden. That being said, the plea deal being what it was, misdemeanors, I mean, honestly, he violated federal law. So, to me, you would think that a federal prosecutor or defense attorney or something would make an appropriate deal for something of that gravity. To have it arbitrarily tossed aside, I don't really know. Maybe there was more justification to it. We will, of course, find that out in the trial. Once that finally does happen, of course, there are processes that they are correctly getting into. Jury selection, financial struggles could be a problem, right? Hunter Biden isn't, as far as I know, ridiculously wealthy. He's just the son of the current president. And although there might be lawyers who would try and seek favor from Biden by supporting his son, it seems to, remains to be seen. And then, of course, yes, if found guilty, he can and should, again, can and should end up behind bars. Surprisingly, these two, although perhaps a little cocksure in the way that they're delivering this, are surprisingly delivering honest information.
Surprised if given Joe's network, if those other people arrived on the scene at that time. But there's reason he has these financial struggles.
Well, he's got a lot of cases.
Correct.
You have to pay expert witnesses to come in, as we've talked about earlier this morning. I mean, there's going to be a debate about what the definition of an addict is. That's going to take expert witnesses. He's facing, by the way, up to 25 years.
And the prosecution's going to have not that much of a difficulty bringing in witnesses because his ex-wife, Kathleen Buell, will testify about Hunter's drug use and finances, and they're in an ongoing custody battle as well.
Well, I mentioned there's more. So if he has financial troubles, it's in part because he's got so many other cases going on as well. He's got a federal tax evasion charge saying he failed to pay at least $1.4 million in taxes.
This apparently is supposed to come to trial in September. And then you have an ongoing divorce and alimony dispute with his ex-wife. I just mentioned ex-wife Kathleen Buell. There was an amount he had not paid, which they thought had resolved. Now she's accusing Hunter of being almost $3 million behind on alimony payments. Again, we don't know if that's the exact number or not, but you add that all up, and that's a lot of legal woes and troubles.
The estimates are he has something like $10 million in legal bills.
So now they're getting into the and we're not going to listen to that. But, yeah, it seems like he's engaged in a lot of criminal activity, failing to adhere to settlements and resolutions, flouting the law. And guess what? Hunter Biden, pay your dues or suffer the consequences. I think that's pretty much really all we can and should and need to say about that. I think I don't know why this keeps moving every time I try and type here. Let's get into the helps if I could type, least welcoming states for gay and trans people. This is a poll that is coming up, obviously, because it is Pride Month, and although this issue is ongoing in American politics, it is, of course, significantly more prevalent during Pride Month. So let's look at some of these headlines. Leaving states with anti-trans, anti-LGBTQ laws for Illinois. So it seems like Illinois is no longer a safe haven. Then there's, of course, the gayest states. I think that has an honorable mention right there. The Pope is actually supporting gay rights, which, I guess if you don't know who the Pope is, he's the head of the Catholic Church, Christianity, if you will, which in America is arguing that it's against the will of God to be gay. And here's the speaker for the voice of God saying otherwise. More affordability. Different country. Where's this? Okay, the wave. That's what we want to see. Well, that's not what we want to see, but this is what we want to discuss.
More than 500 bills restricting the rights of LGBTQ plus people have been introduced across the country this year. 77 of those bills have been passed, impacting education and healthcare. Anne-Marie.
So let's unpack that. 77 anti-LGBTQ laws passed in state legislatures this year. I don't know if people just aren't familiar with how the Constitution and state government works, but the Constitution supersedes every other constitution, every other mandate, right? Like, if it is not at least adhering to the Constitution, it is illegal, it is null, it is void, it is not enforceable. Granted, the way our legislative system operates is it's legal until it is actually overthrown in the court system, but while it is passed, it can be enforced, which does not make any sense to me, if we're being honest. And secondly, it begs to several different questions that are not being talked about. For one, if legislation is already unconstitutional on principle, i.e. being discriminatory, then it should not be eligible for vote or passage in the first place. And then the legislator who brought it up for a vote or wrote it as a bill in the first place should be immediately removed from office. And if you go to my website, www.samronan.com, and click on the issues page and go to accountability, I spell that out implicitly. Oshun, they can't pass laws to help people, but they pass 77 anti-LGBTQ laws. Yeah, it's ridiculous. Aside from it being ridiculous in general, 2024, and we're still queer baiting, queer fear hating. I mean, the gay phobia, homophobia, like, seriously? This isn't 1939. This isn't 1924. This is 2024. We should have gotten over it, grown up, if you will. So, again, anti-anything, anti-any given demographic is discrimination. Right? I think we can all agree that being anti-somebody for some sort of, sexual orientation, gender identity, or race, or ethnic background, or religion is discrimination. We know this because I'm sorry, I thought I had an offline notification. We know this because it's in our Constitution. I always get it confused if it's the 13th or the 14th. I believe it's the 14th Amendment is the anti-discrimination. There it is. And I'll read it verbatim. The 14th Amendment provides in part that no state, which is what we're discussing, can deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. So no state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of the law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. Again, that is a legalese way of saying stop discriminating. Now, I do believe with the Civil Rights Act, there was the addition to discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, and national origin, which, again, I'm sorry, that was just sex. Sexual orientation. Did that include... I believe it was updated. Was the 14th amended to include sexual orientation? Currently, the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution provides minimal Constitution safeguards, but not zero. Point being, right? And we are live fact-checking that. If you're hearing the keyboard typing, which I hope you're not, because I did do the noise suppression. The fact of the matter is, these states are violating the 14th Amendment and whatever federal statutes are in place to protect discrimination from sexual orientation as well. And the fact that there are 77 laws being passing the legislature, making its way to governors across our country is appalling. And each of those laws should be followed with 77 charges of violating the 14th Amendment for each of those people who, in fact, wrote, sponsored, and voted on and passed those bills. That's how you fix our country. Like, literally, people want to talk about the snip machine. And honestly, sure, fine, whatever. One way or the other, to me, I don't think that would make much of a difference. It would send a message, but I don't think it would actually affect change, because if this can still happen, doesn't matter how many snips you do, if that can still happen, then it's going to happen at some point. What you need to do is deter that from the first place, which is accountability reform. Establishing true ethics and morality and barriers in the electoral process, in the legislative process, setting an absolute set of standards. If you are trying to pass a law, or if it's at any point or fashion on your platform to be discriminatory, anti-this, anti-that, trying to force your religious doctrine onto others, you should be immediately removed from office, charged with violating the 14th and any other constitutional amendment that you may have violated in so doing, have the legislation, of course, struck, and voila, you can't pass you can't pass discrimination laws, discriminatory laws. You can't pass laws that limit women's reproductive rights. You can't pass racist laws. You can't pass LGBTQ laws. You can't pass legislation that harms directly, deliberately, or indirectly a specified class of people. It's simple. It's that simple. It is literally that simple. And yet, 10 seconds into this clip, we're finding out that it is simply not happening. And I'll get into that perhaps a little bit more down the road here, but I want you to take that into the back of your head there. We can demand better. We can demand accountability reform. And there's many ways to do it. In fact, in my channel description and the About Me page, if you click on those panels at the bottom, the Write Your Representative and How to Write Your Representative, it'll tell you exactly what to do, how to do it, how to find your representative, and you can start making those demands today. And in fact, I encourage you to.
It breaks this all down for us.
Yeah, in fact, Vlad, this is sort of a bit of a snapshot of all the states that have passed anti-LGBTQ laws, but we're going to highlight a few of them that have really made kind of national headlines. And I'll start things off in Tennessee. So Tennessee has so far passed 5 anti-LGBTQ laws this year, including the first in the nation attempt to ban drag performances. Now, the law was
so this is a previous news story I see. Still relevant to this day because, well, they passed it, for one. I distinctly remember this being an issue, and many comedians and performers wearing dresses just to spite this law. 11 months ago. I need to get better at date checking. Still 11 months ago, 4 years ago, 7 months ago. Least welcoming states 2024. We're back to the gayest and most affordable. Still 11 months ago, 1 month ago. No. Well, at least we're getting pro-LGBT responses here. That would be 2 months ago. I think this is at least slightly more relevant, but where? I'm kind of surprised. This was literally in the top news for today. How about this week? I mean, we're having these are the anti videos, and okay, to be fair, there's no reason to be dressed up in BDSM and going on to a parade. I get that, but like, if you know it's gonna happen, then either as a parent you make the decision, or you just do one of these numbers. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. This is stupid. I mean, I guess we could just react to the conservative rhetoric. We could try that, I guess. I wanted to highlight the states, though. That's the topic. Needing to be adaptive as a streamer, right? Let's see. I'm gonna give it a little bit longer, and if not, then we're just gonna. See, I don't want to give space to people who are being discriminatory. We don't want that. We don't want to even be remotely close to seeming like we're promoting it. Almost. Why, YouTube? You are letting me down, and apparently I can't use the scroll bar. So I think we could, I suppose, focus on the safest, maybe least safe states for LGBTQ. Let's try this. And we get the gayest states, and we get the safe states. So that's cool. That's still 11 months ago, though. I don't understand. This week, dang it. Florida, there's no surprise there because of DeSantis. What on earth? What is this YouTube doing? I mean, it's probably because I'm not signed in. So we'll go ahead and start with this one, and we will give Rand a 58th view. Okay, just checking that my audio.
Hi, everyone. We were going to wait till 4:01 to get officially started.
Is this his own live stream?
Banning discrimination based on sexual identity or gender.
Boom! That's what we wanted to see, folks. All right. Not that this is a good thing. Least supportive. Current LGBTQ plus equality ratings from the Movement Advancement Project, MAP. Ironic, because it is a map, right? most supportive. Of course, no, it's no surprise that our western coastal states and Nevada and Colorado are up there. Illinois is on there, although apparently 11 months ago it was not. And then my geography is failing me. I think that's Wisconsin. And of course, our New England states. They are very, very supportive of LGBTQ, which is great. My own state of Ohio, not so much. Very, very unfortunate. And of course, Kentucky and West Virginia following suit. Pennsylvania, Michigan, Illinois. I'm failing my own geography class, and I want to sit here one day. That's cut me a little bit of slack, all right? It's been a second. It seems that it's either one extreme or the other, with very few kind of in the middle ground, but it goes back to the point that I was making earlier. The only color that should be on this map in the United States of America, given the 14th Amendment and given federal statutes against anti-discrimination based on sexual orientation, that, bothersome reality. The only color that should be on this map is this darkish blue here. And the fact that it isn't is a testament to the failure of our democracy. And it's something that I have discussed and will continue to discuss and need to discuss over the course of this stream and my time on Twitch and on YouTube, and hopefully someday soon in the Oval Office. To which end, it is not surprising that the most conservative states have the least support for LGBTQ. That isn't to say that the individual citizens of those states aren't supportive, but the legislation itself is not supportive. Or the legislature, sorry. And that is also a key distinction. What many people seem to fail to recognize or gloss over is that there are extremely left-wing, liberal, populist, open-arms supportive people in Texas. There are people that are significantly far to the left of even myself. There are people who want nothing but sunshine, rainbows, unicorns, and sugar gumdrops for everybody in Texas, Oklahoma, Montana, Florida, Arkansas, and Mississippi. Yeah, surprisingly, I know those states, right? My bad. South Dakota and North Dakota. But Alaska actually surprises me. But to the point that is being made here, it is, despite what we are seeing on this map, doesn't necessarily mean that the overwhelming majority of people are discriminatory. It just means that their government, their legislature is. And that's unfortunate. But in order to dive into that, we would have to peel back gerrymandering and, of course, the influence of money in politics, and how even some of these smaller states that only have 3 electoral votes happen to be conservative and taking advantage of conservative ideology and an uninformed populace, because most of us choose to be apathetic towards politics, have had such a major influence in our national politics. There are other maps, and I doubt it's going to be in this one, but you'll see that if you actually were to look at the population density of the country, it's literally California, New York City, Texas, and I think someplace in Florida. That's it. That's your population density, and everything else is sparse. And when you start looking at it from that perspective, you start seeing that there is an overwhelming amount of voice from conservative rhetoric and policies, because the way our electoral college exists, and of course how many people can it be serving from Congress and the Senate, how that has been divvied out, has made it so that conservative ideology can be entrenched despite it being in a population-wise minority. And I guess that gets into other things too. When we talk about the silent majority, people think, or the people who say that think they are the ones actually in the majority, when that is just empirically false. That is empirically false. There are people certainly who are conservative, and it may seem like there's a 50% divide, but that's because we don't have a much diversity in our political processes in the first place. And that's what leads to things like this. gerrymandering, lack of involvement, lack of engagement, and then, of course, the system itself, which is designed to allow entrenched power to remain entrenched. But that's a whole different topic. Let's hear what Megan Schuler has to say.
Identity, or negatively, such as recently proposed Don't Say Gay laws or laws that limit access to gender-affirming care. So this map shows their current classification of states, with states in orange and red having more negative, less supportive climates for LGBTQ plus folks, and those in green and blue having more supportive climates. So now I'm going to walk through findings from just a few of the outcomes we looked at. Next. So for starters, we looked at what percentage of veterans did not have health insurance.
Oh, that's right. This is
On
from
the left
the
of this
lens
figure,
of veterans.
we have results broken out by sexual identity for both female veterans in green and male veterans in blue. And on the right, we're comparing cisgender and transgender veterans. I'll note that all prevalences I show today are age adjusted to account for the fact that LGBTQ plus veterans tend to be much younger than non-LGBTQ plus veterans. So as shown here, we found that across the board, LGBTQ plus vets reported higher rates of uninsurance, and that these differences were statistically significant for bisexual vets. So in particular, rates of uninsurance were nearly 10 percentage points higher for bisexual female vets compared to heterosexual female vets. Next.
That's disturbing.
We looked at whether state policy climate mattered and found that indeed it did. So among LGBTQ plus veterans, those living in states with more favorable policy climates.
Right. Don't Ask, Don't Tell was a thing. And it was repealed and then reinstated by the Trump administration and then what, repealed again? I'm not quite, I was kind of on the tail end and I was in the reserves regardless. So that didn't really impact me so much. But I do remember being active duty when Don't Ask, Don't Tell was repealed the first time. I was a bit of not what I am today. I drank the imperialist Kool-Aid a little bit, so forgive me. But when the Don't Ask, Don't Tell was repealed, I went to one of my NCOs who was very, very machismo, very just like not necessarily homophobic, but he didn't want any of that attention on himself. And so the exact instant I found out that Don't Ask, Don't Tell was repealed, I went up to him and I said, Sergeant Snuffy, you have the most beautiful eyes. They have been captivating me since I set foot on base. And for like the rest of the week or the day, I don't remember, but every single junior enlisted person went up to him and said the same exact thing until he just went up in my face and blew up. It was probably one of the funniest things I've ever done in the military. But obviously insensitive.
We're significantly more likely to have health insurance. So to orient you to this figure, we're plotting the relative likelihood or odds ratio of having insurance compared to those living in of smoking than heterosexual veterans, and transgender veterans had higher smoking rates than cisgender veterans.
No, you know what? This is a very valid thing that I don't think people talk about. Like, oh yeah, it's love and all that fun stuff, right? Like I should be allowed to love and be with whoever I want. Like that's a very common conversation. Let's have it. Wonderful. But what we are not talking about is the mental and emotional impact that being, I think I'm allowed to use queer. I'm at least trying to use it in a non-derogatory way. Being queer is extremely stressful to both mental and emotional health. And what do people under stress do? They tend to gravitate towards drinking or smoking. And not shocking at all. And look at the transgender community. Nearly a quarter of the transgender community is smoking due to that kind of stress and the impact of how society treats them. Like this right here, I think, is one of the most tragic statistics that you'll find about being gay in America, unfortunately, especially as a veteran, no less. What else do we got going on in here?
her, and I'm honored to moderate this important conversation. On a personal note, I can still vividly remember the first time I read about health disparities for sexual and gender minorities, because I was struck by how many of the poorer outcomes for bisexual women were true for me. I have since quit smoking and tried to find healthier mechanisms to cope with stress and reduce risk factors. But of course, my choices.
This is going to sound silly, really silly. I did not, it just did not click for me. I know LGBT, AI plus, I know that, but whenever I say the Q, I guess I'm so used to saying the acronym, I kind of forgot what the Q stood for. So you're right. And this is honestly why I say, I am left-leaning, yes, and I am supportive of different minority groups in our country, and I try to be as non-discriminatory as possible. So when I found out that queer at some point was a derogatory term, I erased it from my brain. And I think I inadvertently erased it from the acronym too. So I apologize. At least I am willing to own my mistakes and learn and grow from them.
Are only one element of the complicated set of interrelated factors that are going to influence my long-term health outcomes. Another important component may be minority stress, in which discrimination, prejudice, and social stigma can harm mental and physical health.
We're skipping ahead because...
and there's a lot of work to be done for the people who got kicked out. And unfortunately, it's a very complex problem, because not everybody who got kicked out for homosexuality either. So it's something that I think I would say, sort of in closing, without running on anymore, I think as a nation, we need to recommit ourselves to righting this wrong. The world has changed. We were wrong in the past.
I mean, and I've said this countless times as well. And I just realized I either look extremely pale or like I'm glowing. So I'm still working on the setup in here. It was better when I started, and now I guess it's getting brighter on this side. My apologies, but this is true, and that's not a very.
We need to do everything.
That's even worse.
Within our power.
Wow, I'm trying to not give her an unfortunate pause there, but it's true. Again, we're still committing the wrong, and especially against service members, right? And I mentioned that Eisenhower tried to ban gays from the military back in the World War II, post-World War II era. And he relented because there were so many lesbians and bisexual women serving in the armed forces that it would have been a detriment to the career fields that they dominated, which I believe at the time was the medical fields and the administrative field. So there goes your medical field and anything to do with paperwork and pay, mind you. And if there's one thing service people care about a lot and need to make sure that they have, it's pay, because you only get so much and you only get it twice a month. So it's like, it goes back to saying like slavery and reparations, or giving reparations to indigenous tribes, or respecting the treaties for that matter. There are so many wrongs that America as a country, as an institution, has committed over its entire 250-year history that, like, it's not a question of if we should get started, it's when. Like, when are we finally going to do this? And it might take someone to take the initiative, run, get the support, get into office, and then weather the storm. Because if we don't start taking ownership of our actions, we will just continue to make the same decisions, the same problems, and exacerbate them further. Which is exactly why 77 states were able to pass anti-queer laws. And it needs to come to an end. I mean, outright, it needs to stop. It needs to be put to a stop. Which is, again, why I am not hiding any of my policy positions. I have ran for office, for state level, for congressional level. I've ran at the national level, and I have left my website live throughout that entire time because I have nothing to hide, and I stand behind these convictions. I believe in these convictions entirely. And I think if we start working together collectively, right? And I could be out here, ranting and rah, and, just Trump, this, and screw you, Biden. It might be more entertaining, probably. Hell, we might, become partner in a month or two, right? But there's enough of that already. There's enough Hasanabis. There's enough Jimmy Dores already. There's enough. There isn't enough people saying, hey, this is how you reach out to your congressman. This is how you help your neighbor. This is how you engage an organization. Hey, this is how we can actually make collective things. Hey, here's a policy platform that we can utilize. Steal it, audit it, correct it, what have you. We can shape our nation into our image however we choose to see it. That's the point. That's always been the point. I do realize it's past our hour. So let's give everybody a chance to take a break. I'll get our game started, and then I think we will pick up on... Well, unfortunately, I think we're going to have to pick up on Netanyahu doubling down on Hamas. I say unfortunately because, quite frankly, it's depressing and just heartbreaking that this is ongoing and that the country that could do something about it, the United States, is not. And I don't want to make my stream the Let's Talk About Palestine stream only, because there are a myriad of different issues out there that do concern people. It's just, this is one of the worst atrocities of our time. And I find it difficult not to tie in any other topic into what's happening in Palestine. We have the privilege to be on Twitch right now. We have the privilege to be streaming from the comfort of our home or watching from our toilet or whatever. We're so privileged in this country, we don't even recognize it. We think, I don't have the latest iPhone, I'm screwed, or my iPhone's 15 years old, or I have a car that's 20 years old, or I'm living in a shitbox. Palestinians don't have a home. They don't have a land. They don't have a country. They couldn't go to a hospital if they wanted to. They can't go to college even if they wanted to. They can't even guarantee that they'll have a meal at the end of the day. So I think we're going to have to talk about that, but we will kind of lessen the emotional distress by having a game playing to help kind of lighten that mood. So, BRB, as the cool kids say.
If you know me, you know glasses have always been a big...
As smoke rose over Gaza's skyline, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said on Saturday there would not be a permanent ceasefire there until Hamas is destroyed. His office called the idea, quote, a non-starter.
It's time to
Caught myself on the microphone. Right off the rip, we see that there is no negotiation with this country and this administration. Hamas, oh dear. I wonder, I guess you can't pause the stream, can you?